Hi, welcome to our channel. For today's video, we will recap a sci-fi thriller film called The Martian from year 2015. The plot revolves around an astronaut's lone struggle to survive on Mars after being left behind and the efforts of NASA to rescue him and bring him home to Earth. Have you seen this movie yet? If not, grab some popcorn and enjoy. In the beginning of the movie, some astronauts are seen taking samples of rock outside of their spaceship. However, there is an approaching storm, more worse than they had anticipated. Their inside colleagues warn them, so they suggest that they quickly go back. The crew argues over taking off or trying to wait out the storm. The commander utilizes her power to resolve the conflict, even though the majority would rather take a chance and stay. His orders are to quickly leave. In the process of preparing for takeoff, the ship sustains damage from debris while getting its repairs. Trying to figure out the issue and get back inside, Mark, one of the group's members, gets struck by some debris and is launched into the air, separating him from the others. He can't be reached by the rest of the squad since the debris interferes with his communication equipment. As the storm intensifies, the crew within issues a warning, saying that they must depart quickly as the ship would not be able to resist the wind for much longer. Seemingly missing, the commander tries to locate Mark but is unable to do so. As such, she is compelled to return inside in order to save the other members of her squad. As they leave Mars, the team grieves the loss of their companion. Sadly, one of the astronauts died during the press conference held by NASA's director to inform the public that the team's journey to Mars was successful and they are on their way home. Half buried in the sand, still on Mars, Mark awakens to a suit beeping with warnings about his blood pressure and oxygen saturation levels. Upon rising, he discovers that a piece of debris has pierced him. Cutting off the excess material, he keeps the metal rod in place so that his suit's air pressure remains stable. He heads back to the base, enters, and performs surgery to suture the abdominal debris and close the incision. Mark activates a video recording, describing to the public what occurred to him and why the debris not only sealed his communication systems, but also shut them off. He states that he doesn't hold his crew accountable for abandoning him, claiming that they had all the reason to believe he was dead. He understands that he will run out of food much earlier than NASA's goal of sending a manned expedition to Mars, which will not happen for at least 4 years. He puts some of his crew's items away and strolls around admiring what they left behind. After going over the base's food supplies and keeping a thorough record of his remaining food, he discovers that his current supply is only enough to sustain him an entire year, and that he will have to find a way to grow food for 3 more years. Being a botanist, Mark takes advantage of the fact that the crew had brought some potatoes for Thanksgiving and decides to try and plant them. He goes to work dusting off the solar panels, hauling a lot of dirt inside and distributing it, and even showing the staff how to produce fertilizer. After tilling the soil within, he plants the potatoes. Finding a technique to create extra water is his first task after realizing he does not have sufficient water around him to adequately irrigate all of the crops. After a few days, he sets up a device that produces water by starting tiny chemical fires, and the plants start to sprout on the garden's inside walls that are covered with moisture. Mark's funeral is being held by NASA back on Earth. Vincent brings up the idea of going back to Mars to retrieve the equipment that Mark's crew left behind, but the director states that they would have to wait because everything they're doing would have to be aired, and he does not want the world to see Mark's body. Vincent draws attention to the fact that Mark's body will never decay on Mars, and that they might stage the mission to appear as though they were returning to retrieve Mark's remains for his family. A satellite supervisor named Mindy discovers movement at the facility after receiving coordinates that point her in Mark's direction. She instantly notifies the director by making an emergency call. They have to decide what to tell the public after realizing that this tape is evidence that Mark is still alive. They are concerned that NASA would come under fire for leaving one of its astronauts behind. To inform the public that they will do all in their ability to get Mark home alive, they decide to conduct a news conference. Mark researches maps at the base to determine his whereabouts to be able to meet the future Mars trip in 4 years. Only 35 miles at a time can be covered by his rover, and it is around 3,200 kilometers away. In addition, it will take him about 50 days to go from the base to the destination. He gets to work modifying the rover so that it can go farther between recharges without needing to be taken back to the base. He is successful in tripling the battery life, but only after turning off the rover's heating system. He finds out that he won't be able to make it through the journey without heat, so he digs out some radioactive material to store in the rear to keep him warm. After tracking him with their satellites, NASA announces at a second press conference that they have determined Mark's objective, which is to meet the next Mars crew when it arrives. In an attempt to reach Mark before something bad happens, they have accelerated the projected completion time from 4 years to 9 months. Because they are afraid of distracting Mark's crew from their ongoing efforts to go home, they choose not to inform them that he is still alive. Mark pulls 400 potatoes out of his garden, replanting the little ones and putting the larger ones away for later consumption. After finding the Pathfinder, a rover that was lost on Mars a few years prior, he uses it to contact NASA via the duplicate they have on Earth. NASA can only basically move the camera around with it, but Mark uses hexadecimals to put up a communication system that allows him to ask queries other than simple yes or no responses. NASA instructs Mark via the Pathfinder on how to breach the rover's security and connect with NASA. Mark is relieved when Vincent informs him of their plan to save him. Vincent needs to tell Mark that his crew still doesn't know, but Mark still wants to know how they felt when they learned he was still alive. Vincent understands they must inform the crew, and Mark gets upset that NASA did not inform the rescue crew. NASA tells Mark's crew that he is still alive and that they would be attempting to save him when they go to pick up their mail. Mark calculates how much food he will have until NASA can send another ship to retrieve him, assuming nothing goes wrong. From all of the food that is left over on the base, along with all of the potato crops he has grown, the entry chamber explodes as Mark is working in his garden, hurting him and breaking his helmet. He replaces his oxygen mask by taping it shut with duct tape. Returning to his garden, he discovers that the exposure to Mars' atmosphere wiped out all of his crop and ruined the irrigation system he had installed. When Mark informs NASA about the incident, they understand that he won't have enough food to sustain him until they reach him if they don't expedite their plan to get Mark. NASA gives Mark's former crew permission to get in touch with him, and they all catch up and start insulting each other. After clearing away all the dirt and tarp from the space he had set aside for growing his potatoes, Mark seals the hatch hole and tidies up the foundation, since they believe there is probably nothing wrong with it, and it would take too much time. The ship explodes at launch, putting all of their hard work to waste. After seeing the newscast about NASA's unsuccessful launch, China's space agency offers assistance. Rich, a physicist, assists NASA in devising a more efficient plan to save Mark in a shorter amount of time. The crew of Mark's ship, the Hermes, will travel around Earth's orbit long enough to receive a new supply of food before launching itself back into space to pick Mark up without making a landing. A 500-day increase in the Hermes journey time is the only issue with the idea, with the justification that he doesn't want to jeopardize the lives of every passenger on the Hermes in an attempt to save Mark. NASA's director vetoes the plan. Perceiving this as unjust, a different NASA coordinator discreetly transmits the plan's specifics to Hermes. Speaking among themselves, Mark's crew considers carrying out the plan, knowing that doing so would amount to mutiny. After much deliberation, they conclude that it is the proper course of action and spend the next 500 days apart from their family in space. To go back for Mark, they vote unanimously. Informing their families that they will be gone longer than anticipated is something that every crew member does by phone. The Hermes has deviated from its intended path, and NASA is informed. The director chastises the other coordinator for surreptitiously providing the crew with the plans. The devices that are keeping Mark alive, the heaters and oxygenators, need to be gathered and transported to the ship in time for Mark to join the Hermes as it passes Mars for the plan to succeed. Using the gravitational pull of Earth's atmosphere as momentum, the Hermes swings over Earth to retrieve supplies and return to Mars with less fuel used. Mark starts getting ready to meet the Hermes after 7 months. He loads all of his provisions into the rover after gathering them. In order to occasionally recharge the rover without having to return to the base, he brings the solar panels with him. Mark is told to remove all of the equipment that is no longer needed by NASA, reasoning that his ship will need to travel at a high speed in order to catch up with the Hermes. He removes everything that would have been needed for a 6-person crew and leaves only enough for the 1-person journey. In order to minimize weight, he is also told to remove all of the control panels from the spacecraft because Hermes would be controlling it remotely, as well as to remove the front and sides and replace them with tarp. Mark makes his final exit from the rover and boards the ship to prepare. Shaving off his growing beard, he dons a spacesuit and new attire while waiting for orders from his team. While assuring him that the impact of the launch is not dangerous, it could make him pass out. The tarps are nearly instantly drawn into space as Mark's ship starts flight. When Mark faints, he cannot wake up to let his team know he is doing fine. When Mark awakens, his crew tells him they will not be able to dock their ship near enough to Mark's. To increase their chances of reaching Mark, the commander gives one of the crew members the task of building an explosive and rigging it to the back of the ship to slow them down. They detonate the bomb and enter Mark's spacecraft, but they are not near enough to get to him. After putting on a space suit, the commander approaches Mark while strapping herself into a chair outside the spacecraft and tying it down with a rope. Since the cable is sadly insufficient, Mark makes a hole in his suit and guides himself to the commander using the air pressure. After she catches him and pulls him in, they return inside to meet up with the other members of the group. They inform NASA that they are headed home with Mark. The movie ends as Mark is now teaching NASA officials on space safety. Meanwhile, the crew members of the Hermes watch another spacecraft venture into deep space. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this movie. See you in our next video.